It should have been live on the air anyway. So we broke my own rule. Good morning or good afternoon, everybody. This is William Rochelle, but you can call me Bill. And I am here live and honored to be with BambiLynn. Bambi has such a great story to share. And it's a story of overcoming, becoming, faith, and a trust and belief in God.
Absolutely.
I met Bambi. This is the first time Bambi and I have ever seen each other. But I met Bambi over the phone because I wanted to do an article. I was looking for content. And one of her good friends is the mom of one of my good friends. And we kind of connected and we spoke. The conversation went on for like an hour, I think.
It did.
Which was unusual because it was kind of like a quick kind of like, what can I get from Bambi for some content? And I wrote an article. I think it was a beautiful article. I think
it was an amazing article.
Thank you so much. Awesome. But it was hard because, and I think I told you at one point, it's taking longer for me to write because your life is so rich. You can't just write like a surface article. It has to kind of come from the heart. As I dive into treasures of my heart.
That's my second book.
I know. And the Journey of Josephine, it's all right there. HealingThroughStories.com.
My other one comes out in June.
What's that going to be about?
It's called The God. Are you right? Oh, no, just keep talking about me first. Just keep, layering it on, like, come on, keep going.
No, but your spirit is so great. And afterwards, she sent me like these care packages. I think you sent me two. The first one was all blue. And I still have this net.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah. I ate all the blue candies and the gum. And I think there was cereal. Everything was blue. It was so cute.
And it was written, it said something out of the blue just to thank you.
Yes. And I did an unboxing on it too. So I'll share that video afterwards. So how has life been treating you, Bambi?
It's been a journey, of course. And you did get an orange one that says, "Aren't you glad you met me?" or something like that.
Yeah.
Something, those quirky little things that I come up with in my head.
But it was really cute because I was at home by myself and I get this box and I'm like, what is it? And it was like, this is the cutest things.
Yeah. And I do that as a ministry also. Like right now, whenever somebody contacts me and says that they're, or struggling or whatever, I run a ministry now of a little bit of sunshine, of encouragement, that I get people all across the country to send cards to people that send me an address. So they're getting cards from all across the country. And if somebody's local, I'll put together, some kind of basket and leave it at their door. In fact, because I don't want them to know it's me, I actually go up to their door with an umbrella so they can't see my face. And I'm sneaking up to the door, to leave something. It's the little things that count in life. I tell people all the time, you don't have to do something big in order to be noticed.
I think some people you need to. Yeah. And I just think that everything about you is of service, which is phenomenal. Yeah. And we need to get into your story.
Yeah, because I was just going to say, when you go through much, you get through it, you get through the muck of it, what else do you have to do but to become a different person, to grow, and also to impact other people's lives? I have been on since March of last year. You are my 197th interview that I have done on a podcast. You almost hit 200 wish we could have celebrated that, but you're not my 200 yet. So, but I've been able to share my story. I've been able to, be on radio stations, be on podcasts, to share my story. Our trauma is not our death sentence. And I think that we're thinking that we go through all this trauma in our life, that's our death sentence and we can't live beyond that. How about taking a new look at our trauma and the things that we go through in our lives and look at them as first aid kits? Look at them as first aid kits for yourself and for the people behind you that need to know, how did you do it? How in the world did you do this? And I tell people all the time, I did it because I was sick and tired of being sick and tired of being the person that walked in the room that everybody's going, oh, poor Bambi, she went through this, she went through that. And I got tired of being that person in the room. I got tired of wearing the t-shirt that says, hey, I'm a trauma victim, because of my childhood and the things that I had gone through. Now I want to be that person that walks in the room that people run to and say, hey, give me some ideas and how I can work through this. Teach me this so I can work through that. Instead of I'm the first aid kit, that walks into the room now. And I think that when that happens in your life, because good and bad run on the same track, and you have to be able to see the good and the bad. In fact, I have a client that I had her make train tracks and then say good and bad runs on the same track. And her homework for the week, was to tell me the bad things that have happened, because we do need to discuss it. Tell me the bad, but I want you to tell me the treasures that you have received because of that bad, because good and bad run on the same track. And if people understand that, powerful to understand that.
How are you able to do it without, and maybe you did, was there ever a point where you were bitter?
I wasn't bitter, but I was pissed. There were times in my life that I wasn't bitter. There were times in my life that I would say, my story, just to give your audience, a little bit of a background, I wrote my story, The Journey of Josephine, which is the story of my life, that when I was a little girl, my mom made me a doll, which became my security blanket, which became something that I told my secrets to. All of us have either a stuffed animal or we had a blanket that we carried around. I had my doll, Josephine. And my life was a lot of trauma. When I was 4 years old, I had a grandfather decide, he loved the idea of coming into my room with a bathrobe and naked. I've had a dad that was an alcoholic. I've had 3 different suicide attempts, to end my life, because who's going to care that I'm here? We lived in complete poverty. My parents went back and forth for 10 years. And then after that, my mom raised us kids in poverty. We didn't have a lot. There were 4 of us. I left home the day after my 16th birthday, and I moved in, with an uncle and my cousins, and he was a sexual predator. And he ended up in prison for 10 years, not because what he did to me, but because what he did to other women. So he ended up in prison. I got married really young. My first husband, decides that other women were, better than me, but I had 4 children under the age of 5 years old at 22 years old. And then I married another man that, I was 2 weeks after we got married, I was a victim of domestic violence. So, I've had to work through that. I had an attempted suicide at 16 years old, and I went to a psychiatric center, and I found out that I was pregnant, for my first daughter, which is going to be 38 this year. And that was a turning point in my life. It was a definitely turning point in my life, because that's when I surrendered my life to Christ. That's when I surrendered. And I said, if there's truly a God and you truly are real, you need to save me and my baby, and I will honor you, all the days of my life. So that's kind of like, I raised my kids as a single mom. I homeschooled my kids for 27 years. I am a mother of 6 adult children, and I have 13 grandchildren. And one of my precious grandchildren, is playing around in heaven, as part of the great cloud of witnesses. So that's pretty much an overview. It was 6 years ago, and I get to tell this story. I never I never not include him in that I have 13 grandchildren, because he was a lot. He was a lot to us.
Yes.
So that's pretty much the overview of my, of my book.
So at 16 is when you surrendered your life to God?
I did, at 16. And I didn't know, when I was a young girl, at that time, years ago, I don't know if there still is, but there used to be church buses on Sundays that went around picking up the misfits, and took us to church. I don't know if people still do that, but I was a misfit. My mother and people in our neighborhood, our parents looked at the fact, oh my goodness, I don't have to be with my kids for 4 hours. Yeah, get on that bus,
Right.
So I knew about Jesus, but I never thought that Jesus was for me, because I wasn't part of the family. I didn't have a church last name, that was part of the family of the church. So I just always thought that I was like this outcast, and Jesus was always looking at me, but he wasn't going to accept me in, because I wasn't a famous name within the church. So at 16, when I surrendered my life, I knew what it meant to be a Christian. I knew what it meant to lay your life down. But mine was totally in desperation. I didn't want them to take my baby, because they told me that people like me don't have babies, and we're going to come up with some options, for you tomorrow. We'll sit down and have some options.
People like you, meaning?
I was depressed. Nervous breakdown. I'm in a mental institution now with, teenage girls. I wanted to end my life.
So let's stop there for a second.
Yes.
Because there's just a rip run question coming in. The first thing I want to ask you is, at 16, you left home and never went back, right?
I did, yes.
Why did you leave?
It's really funny that you asked that, because every third Sunday of the month, I'm part of an author group, and we read our original works that we have done. This past week, I actually wrote the story of a cake, and the cake was an angel food cake. When I was a young girl, every birthday, my mother made an angel food cake with pistachio pudding and whipped cream, and that was our cake. My 16th birthday, my mother and I, we didn't have a good relationship. I didn't feel loved. I felt like the black sheep of the family. My mother wasn't a hugger. My mother wasn't a words of affirmation person. Looking back, she just, she's just trying to make it, kind of thing. And for my 16th birthday, I said, hey, can I have a party, and can you give me a store-bought cake? I don't want an angel food cake. And she told me no. And for some reason in my mind, that was the last straw for me, because I felt like I wasn't loved. That was the last straw. I had it in my mind that I now was leaving, because if she can't even give me a store-bought cake, for my 16th birthday, I'm not going to stay anymore. I've had enough. And plus I was bullied a lot in high school and in school, mostly because we are poverty stricken and because of my name. So I wanted a new start. So when I called my uncle, he said, absolutely. Yep. You can come, never knowing he had a plan also. And so on my 16th birthday, I had all my stuff packed in 2 garbage bags, and my mother walked out of the kitchen with a store-bought cake. I was like, looking back now, it was white and it had purple flowers and stuff like that. And my mother had said to me, oh, there's no drums, are there, Bambi? And she had said that to me, years behind, when I wanted a pair of Jordache jeans for Christmas, and she bought me a Jordache jumper.
Oh my God.
Do you remember?
Yes.
And she bought me this blue jumper, not Jordache jeans, but a blue jumper. And she said
Jordache jumper, or
it was a Jordache. It was blue and red, and it had Jordache on it, but it wasn't a pair of jeans to make my butt look great when I went to school.
Okay.
If
I remember the commercials.
You know what Jordache are.
Yeah.
And so she's made that comment again, said to me, no drums, are there, Bambi? Well, you didn't give me what I wanted, when I was 13 and wanted Jordache jeans. You gave me a jumper. And now you told me you weren't going to give me one, and you make this and you have this cake. So I got in my uncle's car with my garbage bags and went to his house and didn't understand. My uncle, violated me, and my uncle, molested me and abused me sexually. And I didn't go back home because, at that time, the saying goes, you made your bed, you lie in it. How am I going to go back to my mother's house? And so I never returned back.
It's interesting. I left at 16 as well.
You did?
Yeah. And never went back. And I don't want to speak ill of,
and I'm
of
having
that time.
grace. And, and when I told you that I wrote this blog, this past, for the author group, and I wrote about how I look at that cake differently now today than when I did, then. And as
why
a mom,
why didn't the cake stop you from, because the cake is what you wanted. Why didn't that stop you from going?
Because I was a determined, sarcastic, had the world by the, the balls, so to speak, and I was leaving.
Because you had to be.
Yeah.
You had been bullied.
Yep.
You didn't feel loved by your mom. So you had created this skin.
Yes.
And a lot of people don't get that about teenagers, is a lot of that exterior is a wall of protection.
Absolutely.
So you said now you look at the cake differently.
I do look at the cake differently. I see, when I was thinking of something to make, I had an angel food cake in my cupboard, and I only had pistachio pudding, which was like, what the heck? How do I only have pistachio pudding and angel food cake? And I realized, because I'm a mom and because I made some mistakes, as being a parent. I have some children that look at me as a hero, and I have other children that still look at me as a villain, that I ruined their life. But I think the older you get, the more that you experience life, the more that you've been beaten down and you got to get back up, you start looking at life a little differently. And, and my mom, that was all my mom had. That was all my mom could do. She didn't have enough energy from being beaten down herself and being a single mom, living in poverty. My mom worked, but we were what they call working class poverty, that we couldn't get any help. And she had 4 kids, and she had kids that, wanted to explore their lives. And I think, looking back at it now, I think that was a tradition for her. That was a tradition that she just wanted to thing. And I have traditions in my family that my children go, I don't understand why you keep doing this. But you think you're showing them so much love, and you realize at that age, we don't look at that. And I think that we just have to grow up. And now I have a little bit more compassion. And I had my grandson with me this past weekend, and he's 15. And one thing that my mother did with me, which is so weird, is that she would play gin. And so I taught my grandson how to play gin, this past weekend. And he wanted to beat me, so he made me keep playing until he could beat me. So it was such an emotional weekend, because my story, and I wish that I can have my mom understand this. My story, my perception of my story has nothing to do with her.
Yeah.
I didn't do it to hurt her.
Right.
I didn't write my story to hurt her. I wrote my story because I needed to heal. I needed to take my life back, and I needed to get rid of the trauma t-shirt, and it's not about her. And I wish that she could see that.
Is she still with us?
She is. She's still alive. My dad's not, but she is.
Do you guys talk?
No. I'm going to try. I am going, I'm going back to Buffalo in May. I'm going to try. I went to try to talk to her, last time that I was in Buffalo, but there were some things that happened, that I found out that she was part of it. And I was like, I can't do it.
Yeah. Yeah.
I just can't do it. But I have compassion for her now.
Yeah. Because you understand her better. I
understand her. I'm 55 years old. Yeah. I've lived some life.
It's interesting because My mom and I have healed,
Mm-hmm.
but certain times, I talked to her right before this came on, because my mom has her own ministry, and I said you should listen to my podcast, because it's going to be more faith based, and this story is just magnificent. And then she started talking about her story, and I always have to tell her it's not about you. You know, when I talk about my trauma as a child, she talks about her trauma raising us, and I keep on having to say, but you were the adult. So how are you comparing this?
Yes. And
So
all of our
that's
children, all we want to hear, and I think about this with my children, because I made some mistakes. I grew. I was 22 years old with 4 children under the age of 5 years old.
That's a lot.
And then I was 28 years old when I got pregnant for identical twins. So I had 6 children in my early 20s. And one of my children said to me just recently, he said, Mom, I guess I didn't understand all the stuff that you have gone through. I guess I didn't get it, and I didn't understand that you picked up all the crumbs off the table and didn't understand that you belonged at the table. So your whole life was all this drama, and all this trauma that you've gone through. And I didn't realize that. But with my children, I have to allow them. And I think it's me growing, and it's me developing, finding out the healing, realizing that my children, there are 6 different perspectives. There are 6 different stories. There are 6 different points in their life that they were born into. So some of them like my daughter that's going to be 38 years old, she should be the one that should be hitting me upside the head all the time and beating me up, because she had to walk through the whole trauma.
Right.
She still was loyal to me. There are some that walk through the trauma and say, I'm not going to be loyal. And I have to be okay with that. And as a mom, that was really difficult for me to be okay that I have 2 children that don't talk to me, and I have 3 grandchildren that I don't have a relationship with. I have to be okay with that, because they have to walk out their own lives. Absolutely. And anytime that they want to see me, anytime that they want to build that relationship, my first words as their mom should be, I'm sorry. Not, oh, well, you have to understand this happened. That could be part of the conversation after my children have their voice. And I think that as parents, we don't understand it, because we're thinking, if you see a different perspective, we're thinking you're blaming us. And you're not. You're just telling us. You're not saying, you were a terrible mom. We're just saying this is how we experienced it. And we don't know how to, because our children are our heart and soul. Even after you grow, your cells are still inside of us. You are part of us. So we don't understand that anytime that we didn't do something right, it's not that you're trying to get even with us. It's just that you want to be heard.
Yeah. That's interesting, because I think in what you're saying is something that I've just started recognizing, is that we all see the world through a different lens. And my brother and I grew up in the same house, and I would say we grew up in an upper middle class, hardworking mom, put herself through law school. And my brother would say that we were raised in the ghetto. And I asked my mom one time, why does he think that? And she said, because he used to drive to the ghetto to hang out with his friends. So he actually did. And people out there, a ghetto doesn't mean anything racial. It means, it was just a rough area.
Yes.
So our perspectives are different, and the way that we deal with life is different.
Yes.
It just matters,
and it matters your
which
birth
lens
order.
you're looking through.
It matters your birth order. It matters when you came in, what stage of life were your parents in, and things like that. It all connects. And I think that now, because we're at the age that
you're at the age.
I'm at the age. Sorry. I'm at the age that we didn't talk about our trauma in our homes.
Right.
We didn't talk about anything that was happening within our homes. And we were always told, you don't tell our secrets. We now
Yep.
live in a society today that people are telling their secrets. I think for them, some of it needs to be, like just because your mother gave you, corn and you wanted beans doesn't mean she messed up your life, kind of
Right.
thing. But they're able to talk about it, and we're able to see and acknowledge some things that my mother never would have spent the time to acknowledge. My mother said, I raised you, and that's the way that it was. I look at things and say, I raised you, but oh my goodness, I wish I could have done better. Oh, I wish that I was healed and healthy, in my relationship. But I was struggling myself. I was going through, infidelity, sexual problems and domestic violence. And I had gotten burned at 25 years old. I had a pressure canner blow up on me, so there were so many.
A pressure canner blow up on you by accident?
Yeah. I had
Right.
I had spaghetti sauce inside of it, and the lid sealed itself. And so it blew. So when we went to try to unseal it, it blew up. And so I spent 17 days in a burn unit.
God.
At 25 years old. Like we moved 13 times, and these are some of the things that my kids didn't see. They experienced it, but they didn't realize all that stuff like affects, somebody. But I just wish that I could have done, I just could have done better, but I didn't know better. And now
but you did the best that you knew how to do in that moment. And one of the things that helped me with my mother is that I recognized that she had me at 20. And then I looked at my mind at 20. And my daughter just had her first child at 32. She's a way different parent.
Yes.
Way different parent. And my mom was similar to you. My dad died when I was 8 from a heroin overdose. So she had, 2 kids by herself, trying to figure out life. And it was just, it wasn't the Brady Bunch household. It wasn't that household that we saw on television in the 70s and 80s, so anyway.
But I remind people too, though, in that, William, is that we have to remember that the Brady Bunch was 30 minutes. That they tried to solve. And so I think in that aspect, you look at any of the TV shows, the sitcoms at that time, we were watching them thinking, wow, why is their life so great? Your life and how you were raised is probably about 90% of us. But because we have this idea that this is supposed to happen and that we're supposed to all get along really great. And we're, I tell people too, when you see a mom and you see pictures of a family, that they just had their photos done, you need to know that 10 minutes before that mother was screaming, yelling, and she was saying, don't you dare eat that chocolate. Don't you dare put those socks on. And if you ruin my picture, this is the only picture that I get. It's Mother's Day and you ruin my picture. Then 10 minutes later, there's a picture taken. So we get this preconceived idea that there's this happy family. No, there was something that happened 10 minutes for her to get to this.
Yeah.
So we can just understand and realize that we're all just living life. We're all just part of this life, and we're trying to figure it out, and we're going to fall and we're going to get back up. We're going to fall and we're going to get back up, and we're going to keep trying again. And what we need to do as a society and as parents and as moms and children, have grace.
Yeah, absolutely.
Grace.
At what age did your children start reading your book or understanding your story?
I have some of them that won't read it because they said it was too hard to read, for their mom. It was too hard. Some of the things I had gone through, they're like, Mom, I can't comprehend that my mother is this child. So it was very difficult for them. My oldest daughter, my loyal, faithful teenage pregnancy daughter, she read it and, had book launches for me and, and everything like that. Family members, read it and were really encouraged that I shared it. There were some people that were offended, by it, but Just like I said, I didn't write it.
When you
for
say
them.
offended by it, do you mean family members that were offended by
Yeah,
it?
they were a little offended by it
Okay.
because, I told my story, and, and they live in the time that, no, you don't talk about that. They were more offended. It was weird. My family was, but then some of my family members, some of my uncles and aunts and stuff like that, wrote me, bought my book and everything, and said, "You were so brave. We knew
Yes.
that some of this stuff was going on, and we were trying to help you, and trying to help your mom and things like that, but it was a time that they had their own children too, so they knew some of it. I never told anybody that my grandfather had molested me as a little girl until my grandmother died, but there were other family members that did tell. And for some reason, I held it on my shoulders that if my grandmother would have known that it happened to me, that it would have devastated her. And then where was she going to go?
So so your grandfather had done the same thing with other cousins, or
yes, and other little girls in the neighborhood.
And they told the story.
One of them did. Yeah, one of them did tell the story. And so I never, they asked, I never revealed it because I just
was she believed?
I don't know if she would have believed, but I felt like what was my
the one that told about your grandfather, because a lot of times women tell things and society tends to poo-poo it. So when
they did believe, they did believe, because then after we found out years later, because he was my grandfather by, he was not my biological grandfather. He came into the family when I was born. So he wasn't my real grandfather. And I just felt like I wasn't going to tell anybody because, my grandmother had been married to him for a while, and, where was she going to go? The pressure, sometimes people say, did your perpetrator tell you not to tell anybody, or, anything that happens a little bit, but mostly people that have been abused and have been molested as a child, they're not going to tell anything anyhow, whether you threatened them or not, because they're not going to ruin the dynamics of their house. What are they going to do? Well, I'm going to go tell my grandmother. What's that going to do to my grandmother? So we carry that until we become old enough to be able to share it. Nobody had to tell me. Nobody had to threaten me. I wasn't going to ever tell anyhow.
And you knew in that moment that it was wrong.
I did. I was scared. I was 4 and 5. I was scared.
Oh my God.
And I just, he just wasn't. And that, and I already was from a home with trauma, because my dad was an alcoholic, and my parents split up over and over again all the time. And, we'd have to go back when he found Jesus again, and then the drinking would start, and then, we would leave, and then we'd go back, and stuff like that. And I remembered the last time I was 8 years old, the last time that my parents decided they were going to be together. And my mom was outside cleaning out our chairs, because when we were little, liver and mashed potatoes was very popular when we were kids. So
popular, or we were forced to eat it.
Yeah, that's what it is. So we would take, my brothers and sisters and I, we cut a hole in the chair and took the whatever, the film out of it, the cushion out of it, so we could shove the liver up in it whenever we were served it. So my mom was outside and she was like cleaning out the chairs. And I said to her, "Mommy, I don't want to go. Please don't make me go. Daddy hasn't changed." And she said, Yes, he has. And you don't understand. I said, "Please, can I just move in with Grandma?" Because my grandmother lived across the street from me. And my mom said, "No." And I said, "Please, he hasn't changed." And my mother slapped me across the face. And my mother said to me, "You don't understand." And I didn't understand until I was 28 years old and I got slapped for the first time across my face. I didn't understand what she was going through until I lived 8 years in an abusive situation, because I was trying to make my family work. So I didn't understand that. I didn't understand what she went through until I had to walk it myself. And then when you have to walk it yourself, you realize, wow, she was pretty brave.
What happened after 8 years?
Finally, the relationship dissolved. I had I had some friends and I that we went on a fast, 22-day fast, and asking God, you need to remove him without me being anywhere present, that it had nothing to do with me. And 22 days later, I was not in the house. There was an incident that happened, and we never returned together.
Okay.
So
All right.
it was very volatile, but I didn't, and plus, I'm part of an organization that helps women in transition of, domestic violence. And, in October is Domestic Violence Awareness Month. And they always have these things that says, why does the woman stay? And has all of this thing, why she stays. And I hope to be able to change the narrative of stop asking a woman why she stays and start asking the man, why did he feel he had a right to hit her in the first place? Don't ask a woman why she stayed.
Right.
Women stay because that's who we are. We're nurturers. We're going to do everything we can do to keep our family together. Don't ask me why I stayed. Ask him why he hit me. Ask him why I had to fear living in my own home with my own children.
Yeah. I get it.
I hope to change the narrative.
Yeah. That's very, very deep.
Yeah.
And you taught me something, so I will learn that. Our stories are different, but they run along parallel tracks. Like I told you, my dad died when I was 8, but between 0 and 8, it was a very abusive relationship. Between him and my mom. I remember him putting a gun to her head. And this is all before 8 years old.
Yeah.
And my cousin and I talked about it on Saturday because he's a little bit older than I am, so he can remember more.
Mm-hmm.
And while we were talking about it, my cousin said, but in his defense, and I don't know if I really wanted to hear it or not, but he said, but in his defense, he was a Vietnam vet, and a lot of them came back messed up from being in Vietnam. All I remember is being 8 years old and thinking it's over.
Yes.
And as an adult, I think about that 8-year-old kid, and his father just died. And instead of feeling sorrow, that 8-year-old boy felt a sense of relief.
Yes. Yes.
It's even today. I mean, it doesn't make me sad. I mean,
it is. It's part of your story.
Yeah. It doesn't make me sad at all. It's when I reflect on it, I can't comprehend the lack of sorrow and the feeling of relief. I understand how it felt in the moment. And people would say, "Oh, I'm so sorry," and I was like, "Don't be." I wasn't. There was never a sense of sorrow, because even we talked about our parents. Even though my mom and I had a very tense relationship, at 8 years old, your mom is your best friend.
Absolutely, she's your hero.
Yeah, and so it was me watching the person I look up to the most.
Yes.
Having a black eye.
Yes.
Or him taking a candle and setting her hair on fire. Like, who does that? And not understanding that this isn't normal,
Right.
Because back in our day, back in your day.
Back in my day. Yes.
we were told, don't discuss what goes on in the house.
Absolutely.
So I didn't know that this wasn't going on in everyone's house.
Right.
So anyway.
And that is and I think when you talk about hero, my son said to me one time, he was reading a book on the relationship between a mom and her son. And when a son is young, we are a hero to them. We can do nothing wrong. Our sons say, we're going to buy you the biggest house. You're going to live right next door to us. I want to marry you. Our boys wear our clothing. They walk around with our high heel shoes, and things like that. They just want to be everything to do with their mom. And then there's a point in a boy's life that he's starting to become a man. And then he's starting to realize that his mother has flaws.
Yeah.
And that affects a boy, that affects a man. And that's why a lot of times men and boys, young men, they pull away from their mother because how dare her be human? And they have to go back to forgiving themselves and forgiving their mother for being human. And then they begin a respectable relationship, And so like my son said to, even with his wife, they were sitting on the couch and we were just talking, and he said, to his wife, he said, if I was to have an affair on you, you would beat me out of here and you would shove me out of this house and I wouldn't return. He goes, but you know what? I would be able to call my mom, tell my mom what I did, and my mom would allow me to come because her love is unconditional. A mother's love is so unconditional. So it's so different. That's the only kind of love that is unconditional. It may be damaged. It may have some tatter to it, but a mother's love is unconditional. But a man, we have to allow our sons to let go, and we have to allow our sons to begin to start looking at us as human and not, and we can still be a hero, but we're human.
So I'm surprised you said that because of the relationship with your mom.
I know.
Because I at times didn't feel as if that love was unconditional. At times I felt there were conditions to it, especially when she became born again. And then, it was really kind of not judgmental, but I don't know if you ever went through this, but
absolutely.
You're outside and you're drinking, and then one of your friends stops drinking, and then they're like, why are you still drinking? I'm like, just because you stop drinking doesn't mean I have to stop drinking,
Yes.
And so that it's getting better. Like I can't be 100% honest.
Yes.
With my mother, because I think that certain things she's going to
well, I
think
about. When you say stuff like that, I've been saved 38 years. But in the beginning of my walk, I would, for some reason, and I think this happens to a lot of people, when for some reason, when I would open up the Word of God, I would always see the do's and the don'ts. I would always see the laws that I needed to follow, because I had been such a wretched sinner and the things that I had done. So now I have to try to be good. I want to try to do this good. I want to try to do this that when people see, wow, there's a change in her. And not that that's bad, but it does form a legalism. It does form a way that we think that we're better than everybody. But it wasn't that I wanted to show, I didn't want to do that. I just loved Jesus so much, and I just wanted him to love me. And I didn't want the baseball bat in the corner of my house to be bopped over my head. And then there comes a time in your walk, hopefully, maybe, there comes a time in your walk, at least for me, that you start looking at scriptures of empathy. And you start seeing Jesus in a way that he said at the bar, and he never said anything. When he went to go see Zacchaeus that was climbed up a tree, a sycamore tree, he didn't say, hey, Zacchaeus, we're going to talk about your money. We're going to talk about what you've done. He said, hey, Zacchaeus, I'm coming to your house. And Zacchaeus had a conversation and a relationship with him that Zacchaeus was willing to give away all of the money that he had stolen from everybody. When Jesus was at the well with the woman at the well, he says, oh yeah, I know the man that you're with is not your husband. He didn't say, you slut, you whore, you're never going to be able to go into church. The church isn't going to accept you because you have all these husbands and your husband's not, the guy that you're with is not your husband. He just said, you know what? I'm here to give you living water. And it touched her in a way that she ran into the town and told everybody, there's a man at the well that he's giving living water, and he transformed my life. But I think that happens the more that we realize that life didn't turn out the way that I thought it was going to turn out. I got married at 18. The guy adopted my daughter. I thought that, I was a born again Christian. He was a Christian. He came from the church that I was a church bus kid from. I thought that we were going to be a family that was going to go to church Sunday night, Wednesday, and we were going to, sing Kumbaya the rest of my life. And then I was going to grow old with him and sit on the front porch. And life didn't happen that way. So then I'm like, oh my goodness. And then I get married again to another Christian guy that decides 2 weeks after we get married that he starts hitting me. And so Christianity didn't work out. Then I have children that don't look at me as a villain in their life. I've had some hard knocks of things that have happened. So how can I stick? So when I found grace, when I found Christ as grace, and that no matter what I did, no matter what I did wrong, right, or indifferent, he still loved me because he sent his son to die for me. That's it. I don't have to do anything. And that's what people don't understand. Christianity isn't about you doing a darn thing. It has nothing to do with what you can do. It's all what has already happened. That God sent his only begotten son. That I can go to the cross and I can lay it all down on the burdens and all the cross. And when God looks at me and I fail, he said, you know what, baby, I see you through the eyes of the cross. I don't see. I just want you to renew your mind so that you understand that I love you unconditionally, that I love you with an everlasting love. When you get that, when you understand that, your walk changes tremendously. And then you see people where they're at. Powerful. And meet them at the table.
So how do you feel, since we're on this subject, in my opinion, we all have opinions, right? You be you, I'll be me. There's a sector, and I don't know if that's the right word or not, that uses the Bible as a shield instead of a door. And that torments my soul because I'm not like you or my mom. My mom is great. You're great. I don't read the Bible every day. I can't quote every scripture.
No, either do I.
I can tell you that the basis of the Bible is about love and acceptance and non-judgment. He without sin cast the first stone, and honoring our neighbors, loving our neighbors for who they are and where they are. What's your opinion on my view of the shield versus the door?
My view is that I had the most amazing opportunity to spend 17 years into people's homes. I had the most amazing opportunity to sit at tables that were broken. I had amazing opportunities to sit with people that I would have never sat with, if I didn't have the job that I had. I think that when you are in the middle and you see things like Jesus did, he didn't condemn, he sat with us. He sat with the sinners and had conversations. It doesn't mean, my sons hate when I say this, but I believe that God is black and white, but I also believe that there is gray and gray is in empathy. I don't have, and it depends. I'll tell you an example. I went to one house in Georgia, in the Blue Ridge Mountains. I went there for the Census Bureau. The guy opened up the door and he is in transition. So he was a male, but he looks like so he's transitioning into a female. And they allowed me in their home. And I have a personality that I can say, hey, can we have a conversation? Non-judgment conversation. Can I ask you questions and you ask me questions?
Yeah.
And he said, absolutely. Now they were raised in the same kind of group that I was raised. I was raised within a very strict, fundamental Baptist home. I homeschooled my kids. I made my own bread, that kind of thing that's in your head. You only save sex for marriage. You courtship, you court, you're in church 3-4 times a week. And that's how they were raised also.
Okay.
And they had never been with anybody else but themselves. They had been married 8 years, and they have a daughter.
So it was originally a man and a woman.
Correct.
And now a woman and a woman.
Now it's going to be, yes. So they have a child, and 4 years into their relationship, it's hard to, he decides to tell his wife that he wants to be a female, and he's going to start the transitioning from being a female. And I said, well, how'd you feel? And she said, I had to leave. I left for 3 months, and I didn't leave because I didn't love him or her. I left because I needed to comprehend what's just happening to me. What's happening? Like we'd never been with anybody. We were, we lived together. We didn't have sex before marriage, and all this is happening. And she said, she went to her parents, and her parents said to her, you know what? We love you. We do not agree with what's happening. We don't agree with it, but we love you. And I'm going to show you the love of Christ. I don't have to agree, but I also don't have to condemn you. I also don't have to be arrogant enough to think that, but by the grace of God go I. And I want you to know that we will walk beside you through this.
Nice.
Now, his parents had a totally different view.
Freaked out,
won't talk to him, won't have anything to do with him. And he looked at me and he said, Miss Bambi, what would you do? And I'm like bawling now. Like now I'm bawling because now I'm thinking my whole life and the congregation and the neighborhoods and the people the community that we were part of, I'm thinking, what in the world? And I thank God that it's been something that I had already gone through a lot of this for 15 years of going to people's homes. And I said, I have to tell you, and I'll be honest with you, that if you were my son 15 years ago, I would have cast you out. I would have said, no, that's not what the Bible says. And that, no, we cannot allow that. I mean, I cast people out of my house that thought that they were going to bring beer to my house. You're not bringing beer. I said, I couldn't do that. I said, but I'm going to tell you now, I don't agree with what's happening, but I don't understand it all. And sometimes we make decisions because we don't understand what's happening.
Right.
And as parents, we take it so personally. You were supposed to be something different than what you're turning out to. So your parents are taking offense to that. And I said, we have to work it out. Sometimes our initial reaction is, what do you, and we're just quoting verses and we're just don't, but then we calm down and we begin to start seeing you as our child. And I said, but I know today I wouldn't, you guys are married. So it is what, it is. But if you were in my home, there would be some guidelines I want you to respect. In my home, this is your lifestyle and I love you, but there would be some things, some boundaries and he said, and he starts crying. She starts crying. She goes, that's all I wanted to hear. I didn't want my parents to think that it was okay because it's my life. I just wanted to hear the love of Jesus that they had taught me my whole entire life. I don't have to agree with somebody's lifestyle, but I had another household that, the Catholic Church, they were both a same-sex marriage. And she died and I went to her house because she was going to be part of the Nielsen TV ratings. And she said that the priest told her that her partner wasn't going to go to heaven because her partner was gay. And so she wasn't going to go to heaven. And she goes, what do you think? And I said, okay, you're asking me my opinion. So we're having table talk. So whatever I say, we're not like, and she goes, no, I just want to know. And I said, you know what? I said, I've been married 2.5 times. I had an annulment, so I count that as a half. I said, I was married 2.5 times. And you were in a same-sex marriage. I said, God looks at sin as sin. I said, but the problem is that your sin has nothing to do with your salvation. And that's what they're saying. You're adding sin to your salvation when the Bible tells us that if you call upon the Lord Jesus Christ, you are saved. You are saved. If you believe on the Lord Jesus Christ, you shall be saved. If you believe in what he has done for you, you are saved. And then it's kind of a marriage that happens. And then when this marriage happens between you and Jesus, in a way, I'm just using, if you have this marriage, you will do things with your partner because you love your partner. So if the word of God and the word of God says that homosexuality is a sin, just as what it is, but it's how we present it. And it's how I like condemn you and damn you, that what right do I have? And I looked at her and I said, I've had 2 husbands and I have fallen short. I've slept with more men than one, like, so I have fallen short, but where I have fallen short, Jesus comes up. And she's like, nobody has ever said that to me.
Is there any sin that's greater than the next?
The only sin that is greater than is denying the Holy Spirit. No.
Yeah. Yeah.
So if we are going to compare, like, because, years ago we used to say, you tell me, oh, we think, that Mother Teresa is going to heaven because, she's helped all these people, so yeah, she definitely is going to heaven. But then you have the next person go, oh, well, I'm one up on you. This person has done this and this and this, because then you're making it about your works. You're making it about you, when salvation has nothing to do with you. It has to do with Christ did at the cross of Calvary. And let him take care of it. Let him deal with it. Let him deal with it. We're trying to hang on to the hem of our garment, his garment. And we're trying to hang on for dear life. Because if we make it about me and we make it about the things that I do good, then that's not salvation. That's just me thinking that I'm going to get to heaven because I'm such a good person.
Right.
But then I have to compare myself over and over again to somebody.
To somebody else.
And say, well, you can look at me and go, Bambi, well, you don't do that, but I do this. So now we're in this comparison. But how about if we stop the comparison and we just do what the Bible says, that it says, if you believe on the Lord Jesus Christ, thou shalt be saved. And for God so loved the world that he gave his only begotten son, that whosoever believeth in him should not perish, but have everlasting life. Let God deal with the things that of this world. Let God deal with the things that people are doing or not doing. Let him deal with it, because he can deal with it so much better, because he deals with it with the blood of Jesus. Such a better way of looking life.
You are good. You are really, really good. I feel like I got the Holy Spirit up in here, over here.
I love, I just want people to be set free and understand that, like, we all have sinned. The Bible tells us we all have sinned, come short of the glory of God. Every single one of us have sinned, and we have come short. So every time that I think that I'm going to be able to go to God and say, well, I've done this, I've fallen short. But the moment that I come to him and he says, Jesus has covered it, Bambi. Jesus, he paid it all to him I owe. That's it. Then I don't have to be perfect. Then I do things because it's about a relationship. If you and I were in a relationship, and there was this respectful relationship, and you loved me, you would do things to show me how much you love me. So you wouldn't go out and have an affair, because that wouldn't show me how much you love me. It's a relationship.
Right.
That you would show me how much if you love me and you say, oh my goodness, I love my wife so much, I'm going to go buy her flowers. Or do you love your wife so much that you're going to go get her a pile of dirt? No.
Right.
So let God take care of all of that.
That was excellent. That was excellent. The way that you explained it and the story that you wove, you sound like an author.
Oh my word.
I have 3 questions I want to ask you. Okay. First, you said you bake your own bread, so I expect bread at my doorstep.
That's funny. I don't bake my own bread anymore because I'm just by myself.
Well, you can always start again. You could. The other thing is, which I found amazing, the wife stayed with.
She did.
The new wife.
She did.
That
because
is
she stayed
love.
Because she made a covenant, and she loved him.
You know what? The last thing I'm going to say, and I don't want to get canceled, people, but this is just the truth. There are some things that I don't understand, but God tells me it's not up to me to understand.
Absolutely.
You know, because the assumption, the mind's understanding is if you're transitioning to be a woman, then you're going to want to be with a man. That's my
Right.
mind
We're all trying to
assumption.
figure it out. Yeah.
Right. But this young kid one day, well, I'm just going to say it. This one kid one day, I texted him. He worked for me, and he asked me a question, and I said, you know, I'm sitting here at the vet with Bruno, and there's someone sitting across from me. I don't know if it's a man or a woman. And he said, it's whoever they want to be, and you need to mind your business.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, damn, you know, these little kids are more evolved than we are. Because when we grew up, there were certain things that, you know, you wouldn't associate with because you would get afraid that you would be
Right.
put into that group, right? And nowadays, I love the fact that people can be who they are and still find a path towards glory, you know?
Yeah.
And it's not up to us to judge someone else's life. Because as we started in the beginning, you know, you have 6 kids. I have, you know, 2 brothers, and all of us look at our life differently.
Mm-hmm.
And we all grew up in the same house under the same mom. So it's always the lens. So I may never understand somebody else's journey, but it's not the journey that God gave me.
Absolutely.
Does that
Absolutely.
make sense?
Absolutely. It does make sense. And I think that we are better people when we ask the question instead of seeing, you know, something that we don't appreciate or whatever, instead of saying, oh my goodness, what's going on with them? How about, why don't we say, I wonder what their story is?
Yeah. Yeah.
I
That's
wonder what
that's
their
what that kid
story
taught me.
is. Yeah. Because you know what? We don't end up where we're at without a story that has been behind us. You know,
Yeah.
something has happened to us to transform us and to have us have a way of thinking in our lives that nobody understands. And I just, you know, I am so thankful. Like, I can't even thank God enough for giving me those 17 years in people's homes. Because I know that if I didn't have those 17 years, I know I would be a totally different person than I am today.
Because you got to meet people from all walks of life.
I got to meet people from all walks of life. I got to sit at tables that nobody else would sit at. I got to sit at tables that roaches fell from the ceiling, you know, onto my computer. I sat in homes that, you know, that their walls were coming apart, that they had holes. I sat in a $6 million home with a woman that cried like a baby in a fetal position for 2.5 hours because I listened to her.
And what you found out through that, and I think that you told me this in our conversation, was at the core, there's no difference between the $6 million house and the house,
The roach infested house.
yeah, at the core. When I say at the core, I mean the values, the
Absolutely.
soul, the mindset. Well, there's a difference in mindset, because I think when I was explaining this to a kid yesterday, um, when you're in poverty, you really do need to see something, or someone needs to speak something into you to
Yes.
show you that there's a different path.
Absolutely.
So there is a different mindset. If you grew up in a $6 million house, you know that you could do anything you want.
Yes.
But
You're still broken.
You're still broken, right? But you could do whatever you want.
Yeah.
But if you grow up in a slum and no one tells you that there's a different path, or you don't see that there's a different path, I think it's harder to get out of that
It is.
mindset.
It is.
And so a lot of people are like, well, why don't they just pull themselves up from the bootstraps? Because they don't have any boots.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah, exactly.
they don't have any boots. So you can't really you can't really say, because you know your life turned out this way, that everybody's life should turn out that way,
Right.
and everyone else is making bad choices. No, they're making the choices that they understand.
Absolutely.
You
And
know,
that's why my, you know, my vision, that's why, you know, everything that I do is, you know, is representing healing through stories. You know, that's why my website is healing through stories. That's why stories are so important to me. That's why, you know, um my life coaching you know, opportunities is healing through your story, finding your purpose. You know, because until we sit at the table and start sharing our stories, culture wise, demographic wise, you know, everything financially wise, until we can sit at the table and meet each other where we're at and know that we are defined by our story. But my story, but just like you and I grew up in poverty. I grew up, you know, I have a 10th grade education, you know, but I've had the opportunity to write 3 books and homeschool my kids for 27 years. You know, I made decisions and I continue to make those decisions, you know, to lead me to the path. And I wish that I wish that I was so much smarter than I am, you know, that I could figure out all this marketing and promoting crap that you got to figure out. But, you know, I'm learning. But there, you know, I tell people too, one of the best things for somebody to do, you know, that want to start getting out of, you know, their way and start getting out of their trauma, read memoirs. Read as many memoirs as you can. One of the greatest memoirs that I have read that now in past, that's like probably the top 3, was Viola Davis's.
really.
Oh my word. What that woman went through, what her family went through, what she endured. And she tells a part in the book that she was in counseling, and her counselor said, Viola, that 8-year-old little girl already survived. She already went through everything that she needed to go through to get to you for where you are today. Stop going back to that 8-year-old little girl and start living your life that she designed for you to live, because she endured. And
Wow.
what an incredible thing to say. Stop having us go back to that 8-year-old little boy. Stop going back to that 4-year-old little girl and start just going forward, because that little girl's already survived all that.
Yeah.
That we've accomplished what we've accomplished because that 8-year-old boy already went through it. And if we could realize that our lives, you know, that's why I continue to say our lives are not our death sentence. They are our first aid kit. I don't have to live there anymore. Now what am I
Preach,
going to do with
Bambi.
the tools?
Go ahead.
Yeah, just do that.
You're for, and we haven't even talked about your books yet.
I know. I'm sorry.
No. This has been phenomenal.
Oh.
Because that's the purpose of my podcast, is conversations and understanding stories. And I truly believe that when we share our realities, not our Instagram versions of ourselves or my polished LinkedIn version, but just our real selves, someone out there is going to hear it and they're going to say, you know what? I learned how to overcome based on this conversation today.
Yes,
Based
absolutely.
on this conversation. So you've
You
already
know, the
told me about
greatest tools I want to tell, you know, like I love metaphors. You know, metaphors are like my favorite thing, because you learn so much from metaphors from nature. In fact, I even tell my clients one of their weeks is that they have to look for metaphors within nature and tell me how if you look at the story of the oyster has absolutely nothing inside of the oyster until the oyster has gone through something, until the parasites have tried to eat and try to get inside of the oyster and try to get into the shell. The oyster has to go through the hurricanes and the wind and the crashing in order for it to, you know, create what it was meant to create, what was inside of it. But it only gets what was inside of it if it's gone through some turmoil, and that is a pearl. So just know that your audience I want to, you know, end this also with your audience knowing that there is a pearl that is being developed, that is being created through all of your storms, through all of your trauma, through everything that you're going through the valleys that you have to walk through the hurt and the pain and the brokenness of your life. There is something that is being formed for you to understand and to know that this life is going to be over, but you've got to pearl out of it. And understand that you get this amazing pearl, and know that no matter what has happened to you in your life, when a butterfly lands on a milkweed and lays an egg, that butterfly is laying the egg of a butterfly. Just because it comes out looking like a caterpillar and has to go through some stuff doesn't mean it wasn't a butterfly. Just because you have gone through things in your life, and the Bible tells us that he has fearfully and wonderfully made us in the image of him, and he has called us forth, and he has called me by name, and he has brought destiny and purpose into my life. But that doesn't mean that there's not a time that I'm going to walk and I'm going to crawl like a caterpillar, because a caterpillar doesn't understand what his destiny is. He was born for goodness. He was born for destiny because he was born in it. He was born a butterfly, but then he's got to go inside of that chrysalis, that dark, dark moment in our lives. And I know that there are people, your audience. I know that some of them have gone through some dark, dark moments of their lives, and they feel like they're in this cocoon and they can't get out. But what's happening when you're inside that cocoon, you're being reminded over and over again, you're a butterfly. You're a butterfly. You're a butterfly. And the moment that you know and you get it, that you are a butterfly, you emerge. You emerge with your purpose and the plan and the destiny that you were always created to have. But always remember, we are butterflies. Doesn't change just because life happens. And if your audience is in a valley, know that the valley is where there's nourishment. Know that in the valley, that's where the river is. Know that when you're in the valley, that's where the lush grass is for you to lay your head. When you're in the valley, that's where the fruit trees are, because the valley is preparing you for the journey up the mountain. You have to be prepared inside of the valley in order for you to be able to climb up that mountain. So if you're in a valley right now, it's okay. It's okay, because you're getting nourishment, because you got a big climb to get up to that horizon and to say, and have that mountaintop experience. But when you get to that mountaintop experience, I want you to look down, and I want you to see how far you have come. I want you to look at your nails that you have dug, in the sand and the dirt that's stuck inside your nails. And I want you to look at the bruised knees that you have been through. And I want you to rejoice that you have gone through the valley and you've had to walk to the hill. And I want you to look out to that and count it all joy for everything that you have been through, because now you've made it to the mountain. And I just hope that this time that there are people that are part of your audience that understand that everything that they're going through, it's not going to last forever. It's only a moment. It's a moment. We only live a moment once. You and I have given each other an hour and 13 minutes of our moments. We have given it to each other. This moment will never be again. And know that if you're in a dark place, it's only for a moment.
I think this is beautiful. Do you have time to talk about Josephine in Treasures?
Sure, I do. My darling Josephine. This is my memoir. This is the story of my life. This is where you will learn, that I didn't get angry. I just continued to develop into who I am today. This book has helped so many people. When I received it in the mail the first time, and I sat for 6 hours reading my book, cried, wept, healed, some more onions were peeled off of me. And I realized, I closed the book and I looked up to heaven and I said, God, I'm not this girl anymore, but help me to find her. Help me to find her. Because this girl, the girl that you need me to find, she needs the courage to know that she can go on. Let me find this girl. So God has led me to amazing people to be able to find this girl and to be able to give her hope. and encouragement. So that was my first book.
And Josephine is the doll that your mom made for you?
Yes, and I still own her. She's still, my daughter just antiqued this picture, but yeah, I still own Josephine.
Okay.
She's 47,
everyone
48 years old. Then I wrote the Treasures of My Heart, which this is about the fact is that when we go through storms in our lives, sometimes we forget the treasures that we get because of the storm. You only get it in the midst of the storm. It's kind of like when the California fires take place. The only time that the fire poppy shows up is after the fire happens. You know, so sometimes there's treasures, and sometimes we're so caught up in the things that have hurt us that we don't understand the treasures. So this is a book of about 35, 36 different treasures that God gave to me throughout my life, to show you that look for your treasures. Don't always look at the storm, look through the treasures. My third book comes out in June, and it is titled The God Who Sees. And it is about, there are 32 different women that I've taken from the Bible, and I've made them more relatable today. I've made them so that women would know that they have not been forgotten, they have not been left behind, and that God has a plan and a purpose for their life. The God Who Sees comes from the story of Hagar, and Hagar was the concubine of Abraham that had the son Ishmael, and Sarah got mad and threw her into the desert, and she's sitting in the desert wondering what's going to happen to her as a single mom. What in the world's going to happen to her? She's got the son, she's been thrown out, she has no money, she has nothing, and she has the opportunity to name God, because the Bible tells us that she said he is the God who sees, that he saw her in her darkest moment of her life, and he saw her, and he took care of her, and he gave her a purpose and a plan for her life. So that's where the title of the book comes from, The God Who Sees. So there's 32 different women that I have taken on a journey, and some of them, and they're made for today. Like the story of Eve, you know, I took Eve's story as if she was a woman that she would have to go to the prison every week because her son was a murderer, but she never turned her back on her son, but she will always go. And that's mothers today that, you know, they're heartbroken because their children have made bad decisions, but it's still their child, and she would still go, you know, to the prison. So I told the story through that eyes instead of what everybody else would. I told the story of Tamar. Tamar is, there's the story in the Bible is that it was a blended family. David had 3 wives. Tamar was one of his daughters, and she was raped by one of her stepbrothers. So I told the story through the eyes of blended families, of be careful who you allow in your home. Just because you're in love and you think you're in love, you're missing the red flags that are happening within the home with your children. So that's kind of like what the book is about. It's just taking all these women and making them more relatable today.
What gave you the strength, and what was your first step towards becoming an author?
A burning passion, a burning desire to know that there's something inside of me. I had a 7th grade teacher that I had written something in school, and she called me into her office, and she asked me to come into her office. So I went into her office, and she said, I just want you to know that you have a gift, you have a talent, and someday you're going to represent this school in being an author. At the time, I had no idea what that meant. You know, I had to quit school at 10th grade. I did get my GED, so I'm not total, you know, like a total illiterate, but
you know what? I really believe that there are those of us, no matter what type of structured education we have,
yes,
we were meant to achieve certain things, and I don't believe a degree is always the thing that gets you.
I totally
ahead.
don't, and I know that when I walk into a room, people have no idea. I don't represent the face, you know, of a 10th grade dropout.
Right.
You know, and not that you know, and I don't mean that disrespectfully, but I just don't meet the criteria when I tell people. In fact, my friends say, you don't need to tell anybody anymore. Like,
I think it's good that it's shared, because there's someone out there that says, I can't do it because I didn't get my
yeah,
bachelor's. And no, you can do it. You just need to
absolutely.
believe in yourself and know
Absolutely.
that God has put that in you, and you can do
Absolutely.
anything you want.
And, when I was like 27, 28 years old, I had a dream that I was asked to give my testimony. I was asked to talk about my life. And I walked out onto a podium and I looked out to the audience, and the audience, there was a stench to it. And there were people in the audience that looked ragged. They looked homeless. They just looked dirty. And there were words written across their chests that said unloved, hated, unforgiven. And I started sharing my testimony. I started sharing my life. And as I started sharing, I saw the room begin to start changing. I saw the smell of the room started smelling like lilacs, because I love lilacs. And so it started smelling like lilacs, the fragrance. And then their clothing started changing, and they were more dignified and looked showered. And they had new words written across their chests: beloved, loved, forgiven, set free. And that was when I was 28 years old, between 27 and 28 years old. And I know, I didn't like the idea that I lost my job. I don't like the idea that, I'm living on some of my 401k. It's not my plan. But I knew that it was time to do something, because I saw this opportunity that God was opening up doors for me to be on podcasts. What person, after a year I've been doing this, I've been almost 200 podcasts. That doesn't happen, but he continues to open those doors for me to share my dream. And I can see my dream, coming forth.
Manifesting.
And that's where also my books have come from. Like, I wanted to write a book, and every January, my birthday's January 8th, and I would go to a beach or I would go to water, and I'd say, God, is it now time for me to write my story? And every year it was no. Every single year. And I said, can I just have the first sentence? If I have the first sentence, I can write it. And then finally, I moved down south, and I went to Jekyll Island in the Golden Isles of Georgia. And for my birthday, I went there, and I'm like, God, is it time? I'm 52. I was 52 years old. I came home and I saw my doll sitting on my head post in my guest bedroom. I'm like, oh my word, yes. And I began to write, and it took me 3.5 weeks to write my story, because I had been writing it for 52 years. And every night I would read it.
You just started doing this.
Yes. 52 was my first book.
Wow.
And I'm 55
amazing.
now. And I kept reading it to my girlfriend. Every night I would read it. And she was an editor and stuff like that. And we would be bawling and crying, and it would just roll. And after I was done, she said, I can't edit that. Like, there's no way I can edit like that. That is divine, Bambi. I can't edit that book. You're going to have to find something that's not going to edit you out of it.
Right.
Because you can hear you through the whole story. And that's what happened, is that I found somebody, I had no idea what I was doing. I still don't have any idea how editors work and stuff like that. I just happened, my first book, one person became my editor. My second book, my third book, I have a different editor, which she was my daughter-in-law. She was the mother that had lost that she lost my grandson, and their marriage was dissolved through it, but we still stayed friends, and she's my editor. So okay. I don't know what I would have to do. I don't know what I would do if somebody else was editing my books, because she totally edits and she puts it in order. She'll publish it for me. She'll font it for me. She'll format for me. She'll put it where the numbers are supposed to be. If anything ever happened to her, I'd be in trouble, because I wouldn't know how to do it. So that's why my next book comes out in June.
Congratulations.
I'm so excited.
I think that you've explained in great detail how your life has had peaks and valleys.
Mm-hmm.
I loved what you said about when you're in the valley. That's where the river is. That's where the grass is lush. That's where you lay your head. Mm-hmm. And then you crawl out of it. Mm-hmm. I think that you basically everything that I would have kind of summed up this conversation with was in that moment that you said to the audience, which is, if you're down there, just remember it's a moment.
Mm-hmm.
And we talked earlier. I said my cousin and I had a conversation on Saturday, and I was talking about what we both shared. We're looking for positions,
Mm-hmm.
and he said, "Bill, this is just a moment," and so that has been a theme for the last 3 days for me.
That's awesome.
That this is just a moment. It keeps repeating itself. This has been a magnificent conversation for me. Is there anything that you want to add?
No, I just want people to live their lives, and don't have your life define you because of what you've been through. Have your life be defined what you're going to do with it. I have a lemon tree, and I'll end with this. I have a lemon tree, and I've never had a lemon tree. I've always wanted a lemon tree. I've always, so last year for my Mother's Day, my daughter bought me a lemon tree. Now I've had to transplant this lemon tree 3 different times. I've sat outside on my back patio trying to watch the lemon tree grow, thinking that I'm going to be able to watch it grow.
Right.
And then I get blossoms on my lemon tree, and now my blossoms are turning into lemons. But I didn't know, because I'm not from here. I didn't know that lemons are green first before they turn yellow. Mm-hmm. So I was totally kind of mad about that. Like, how dare you? Like, I'm like all excited to have a lemon tree. But, and then, that lemon is going to be able to be harvested, and I'm going to be able to have those lemons in my hand. I'm going to be able to see those lemons. I'm going to be able to touch those lemons, and I'm going to be able to make a decision with those lemons. I'm going to make a decision. Am I going to keep those lemons? And I'm going to look at them and just say, oh, there's just something sour. I'm not going to do anything with them. Or am I going to look at these lemons and decide, oh my goodness, I can add a little bit of sugar. I can add a little bit of honey. I can add a little bit of ice, and I can add a little bit of water, and I can have some lemonade. Or I can look at these lemons and say, oh my goodness, I can make homemade lemon meringue pie from a real lemon that came from my lemon tree. And I tell that story because life is a process. Life is planting seeds. Life is watching harvests. And life is looking at the harvest and saying, what am I going to do with that? I could have chose to be a bitter woman. And you know what? And some people would say that I had every right to be a bitter woman, that I had every right to what had happened to me through my life, that I had every right to stay bitter. I had every right to hold on to these lemons and create bitterness in my heart. But I chose to open up and make a slice through that lemon and squeeze out the juice and create something that would be refreshing to somebody. And that's what I want to leave with your audience. It's your choice. Do you want to be bitter, or do you want to be refreshing? This is your life. You live it once, and it's your choice how you're going to leave it.
Absolutely beautiful. Where can we buy your book?
Well, you can buy it on Amazon. I know that you have people all over, but you can also buy it on my website, healingthroughstories.com. You can subscribe to my website. I only send a blog once a week. I do not bombard people with 2 and 3 emails a day.
That's me.
Oh, my word. Yes. So you could go on my website, and right now I am offering, if you sign up for and subscribe to my my blog, there is a code that's a 10% discount from my book, on there that is given. Or I have t-shirts that I sell that says my story, your first aid kit. And so all my books are on there, and you'll receive a blog every week of things that I write about. So go to healingthroughstories.com.
I noticed on healingstories.com that you also have a link that says podcast. So
I put
are
all
you
of
doing
my
your
podcasts.
own? Okay, so you're not doing your own podcast.
No, it's just that so everybody. So once you give me my this link to this, I will put it on mine so that people could go and listen to the podcast that I have that I've been
Been
on.
on.
Not all of them, because not all of them give me links, but I think there's like 58 of them right now.
Okay, I'll send you the YouTube link for this one.
Absolutely.
It might be easier than the LinkedIn link.
Yes.
What are you doing for Easter?
I haven't decided yet, because I'm heading back to Buffalo in May. So I'm trying to think, and then I'm heading to Alaska in July. My dear daughter is moving. Her and her husband are going to be stationed now in Alaska. So the military right now is behind on their unpacking people up. So she's driving the U-Haul, her and her husband, and I'm driving my two grandchildren to Alaska. It's like almost 5,000 miles. Let that sink in.
I am. I'm so stupid. I didn't realize you could drive to Alaska, but that's a whole different story.
Yeah, you have to go through Canada.
Yeah, I figured that part out. But
yeah.
Anyway, I
And
hear
then
Alaska's beautiful.
It is beautiful. I don't know, I am excited, because I thought that, when I found out that she left, I spent 2 days in a fetal position crying my eyes out, because now I've lost my best friend that I moved to here for, and now she's leaving. But then I get the opportunity, to be able to drive my grandchildren, through our country, to see the beautiful country that we live in. And then I get to go to Alaska, and I get to go to the Arctic Circle, and, I get to see a moose, hopefully. So
yeah.
I'm speaking. Then I'm driving to Dallas, Texas, because I have a speaking engagement that I was asked to speak at through a women's conference. It's called Trauma Through Triumph in Dallas. So that's what I'm really trying to do. I'm really trying to build up a speaking thing, and then do my life coaching. And so I'm hoping that I won't have to take any more money out of my 401k to live next year, but I'm at the point that I really, and I don't want this to sound, but I'm at a point that I can't get a job because I'm really working at this. It's like, that you're at.
This is your calling.
Yes.
Yeah.
So I'm working on that. So I'm just hoping that, it all works out. I've been on enough podcasts. I did a podcast yesterday for Amazon Prime and Roku and Google.
What?
I did. Yeah. And the guy was like you. After, he let me speak for an hour, and I get done. He goes, okay, I don't know what just happened.
Honestly, I was enthralled. And I'm supposed to be like the question. I'm supposed to be the host. And it was just magnificent.
Yeah. That's what he said. He's like, I've been doing this for 30 years, and you have me speechless. And I just share my heart, it's just my heart. So it was just so that will come out in June 1st. So I'm hoping, that would be, that will actually anchor me someplace, on speaking engagements. And I don't want to be big on life coaching. I want to have one-on-one, because what I've done is that I send a box to my clients, a box of things that were projects and things like that we're going to do together one-on-one. So I don't want to, I'm not one of those ones that are saying, oh my goodness, I got to make $12,000 a year, a month. And, I want that one-on-one connection. I want them to, and I priced mine at a point that I knew that single moms, could do it. I priced mine, for an 8-week program, it's $240, because I wanted the single moms, to be able to say, oh my goodness, I can afford $25 a week.
And they can get that through healingthroughstories.com as well?
Yeah, they can do it through, there is a, you can't get a 10% discount on it, but you can go on to healingthroughstories.com. And what I do is I send you a box, and we begin the journey, together for 8 weeks.
So they pay first, and then you send the box.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, people do have to pay first now.
You're not just sending boxes out willy-nilly, and then people are like,
people have to pay now,
Yeah.
So yeah, that's my desire, is to continue, to be, I just want to touch lives. I just want women, especially because I am a woman, and just want freedom. I just want freedom, because it feels really good.
And I'm going to leave with, this feels like love. this conversation feels like love.
Thanks.
And that is authentic and beautiful.
Thank you.
I wish you the best, Bambi, and I really appreciate you coming in.
Thank you so much.
All right.
All
hey,
right,
everybody. Thank you very much for tuning in. I loved my conversation with BambiLynn, and please check out her book, The Journey of Josephine, and The Treasures of My Heart, which I thought it was originally named The Treasures of My Father's Heart, but I don't know where I got that from. And then you can get in contact with Bambi through healingthroughstories.com. Everyone have a blessed day. Thank you for joining in. Bye-bye. Bye, Bambi.